Away. Jaje Wite, Marcus, Osage, Potawatomi, Delaware, Puerto Rican on my dad's side. I'm from One Entertainment Inc., where I get to leverage my work in the entertainment and arts field to speak into the lives of youth. Now, when I say entertainment, I'm the official DJ for Nike N7, the Oklahoma City Thunder, and Taboo from the Black Eyed Peas. When I say I get to speak into the lives of youth, I have the luxury of getting to tell my story and bring hope to students and communities across Indian country. As awesome as my work is, it pales in comparison to some of the work and works that will be discussed on the panel here today. A lot of what I do is as one person, but the discussions today will be about entire systems that care for our youth. Why is that important? Because traditionally, the services provided by many of these institutions were intrinsically woven in and around our youth. Today, we have these systems like education, justice, medical, even peer groups. They're all examples of various different systems that are in place to provide care to our young people, hence the word systems of care. I talk hope and change for a living. But when we begin to talk hope and change at a systemic level, we can have lasting change and bring lasting hope. I wish I could be on the call live today, but I'm pleased to welcome, to facilitate this panel, a colleague and a friend. Please welcome Dr. Jamie Barges.
So we want to thank you all today for being here. And I also want to say, Wado Osta, very good, Marcus, for your kind introduction to the session today. Marcus, otherwise known as MC1, for those of you who know about his music work. He is a System of Care champion in his work with Indigenous youth across the country. It has been an honor to work with him over the years, and most recently with the Culture Forward project that you're going to learn more about in this session. And I also really appreciate how Marcus keeps his focus on our traditional ways while also incorporating contemporary styles of music to reach Indigenous youth. And that's also a reflection of the ingenuity in our communities to keep our traditions alive in today's world. I first want to start with a land acknowledgement, and no matter where you all are right now, you are on Indigenous land. So I put up this really cool map from the NPR to really kind of show the different places in which tribal Indigenous communities came from before these lands were called the Americas. And so somewhere today you are on this map on Indigenous land across Turtle Island, or the Abya Yala, which is what these lands were called before they were called the Americas. So please take a moment to acknowledge where you are. For me, and you could do that in the chat if you would like. There is a chat feature. You could actually acknowledge which tribal lands you are on. For now, I am here calling in today from the Osage Nation, and I also must honor the Cherokee Nation, my tribe, and the tribe that designates our tribal tarot organization, One Fire Associates, and also many of our team members who helped coordinate this session. I also want to honor their good works for us to all be here today. I also want to thank Yasmina Luxinger. She's here with us today for helping us prepare for this session and also for helping us moderate the session. Yasmina will be putting some housekeeping items in the chat for you all, so please take a look at that chat feature. You'll find the chat on the right-hand side. It looks like two speech bubbles on top of each other. And you can also go ahead and get in there and see what the housekeeping items are. She will also tell you in there how to submit questions for the Q&A, and you are welcome to use the Q&A a feature. There is a separate feature for questions and answers, and you're welcome to use that throughout the session. So please use that Q&A feature because it really helps to make sure that we address all of the questions and comments that you have for this session. And so I'm all very honored to be here with this panel session. And also, I just want to share with you, this panel session came together within 24 hours notice before the deadline for this presentation submission. And so I want to share that with you because I know it speaks to the readiness and the commitment of our panelists to advancing systems of care for Indigenous youth. They called us Jedis in this session, and I believe that is appropriate, though I'm only a little Jedi, still in training, and we've got some really excellent Jedis here today to share with us, and so it's really an honor for me to facilitate. Our organization is One Fire Associates. We are committed to providing quality and culturally grounded evaluation, research, and capacity building to help mobilize tribal nations and their communities to promote the quality of life for the people being served. We're also joined by Morning Star Counseling, who's also working with the SAMHSA Society of Care to serve Indigenous youth in Nebraska and statewide. You will learn more about them and also about the term Society of Care in this session as it relates to tribal nations from the North. Also with us is the Kulwi-Chasha Oyate, the Lower Brule Sioux tribe, that's working to advance a society of care with Lower Brule youth and families in their territory, which borders the state of South Dakota. We also have Casey Family Programs in the house to talk about their efforts in advancing system of care for Indigenous youth in foster care. And in this session with the Casey Family Program representative, you'll learn more about the Culture Forward Coalition that Casey Family Programs is helping to support. And also One Entertainment with the inner in mind, as we were blessed with the music this afternoon from their executive director, Marcus Gwynn. And here are today's panelists. I'm Dr. Jamie Barges, President and CEO of One Fire Associates, and will be facilitating the panel session here today. You will learn more about each of our panelists throughout the session, and I've created some questions for each of them based on their areas of knowledge, wisdom, and experience, so you can get a more complete picture of how systems of care are working within tribal nations and communities to learn more about the strengths, challenges, and solutions. We have two objectives today. The first is that we want to raise awareness about systems of care, also called societies of care, with tribal nations and Indigenous communities. While in the past, there was a lot of focus on tribal nation systems of care within SAMHSA and nationally with targeted technical assistance and other focus areas for tribal nations, today there is less emphasis on the unique strengths, challenges, and solutions in systems of care with tribal nations. And so we want to educate and raise the visibility of the work of our tribal nations nationally as we are continuing to advance systems of care. The second is that we want to really generate ideas about how systems and societies of care are operating effective services and supports, because we suspect that many of you in the audience here today are working directly for or with tribal nations or urban Indian health organizations. And so we believe this session will be valuable to you to gain new ideas in the work that you all are doing. And so first we are going to start with Captain Andrew Hunt, or Andy as we call him, retired commissioned officer and project officer, retired from SAMHSA. We've all been blessed on this panel to have worked with Andy in his role as a SAMHSA project officer, who he supported tribal nations and urban Indian health organizations through both the Circle of Care and the System of Care initiatives. Andy's been working for 30 years in systems of care work with tribal nations. And some of us even worked with him before his work with SAMHSA when he was at the National Indian Child Welfare Association. We've all agreed that Andy was our favorite project officer, and I'm sorry, project officers who may be listening, but you do have, work to do and some big shoes to fill. The reason Andy was our favorite is because he understands the importance of culture for healing and how that impacts the way in which we plan, implement, and evaluate systems of care. So we didn't have to do what we call upstream technical assistance with Andy for him to get it. So for that reason, and also because his focus on accountability to the indigenous peoples that we serve, the tribal grantees give Captain Hunt a lot of respect, and he has great reputation across the System of Care tribal grantee communities. And we have been missing you, Andy, since you've been retired. And so it's a great honor that you've taken some time to be here with us today to share your knowledge and wisdom on this important topic. And so welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here. It's good to be back in the system of care, circles of care circle. And I've been retired for almost 2 years now. So I'm looking forward to finding ways to get back involved as an independent consultant. So and I appreciate the opportunity to share a tidbit of what I learned over the last 30 years of my career and working with tribes. So, it is, I do greatly humbled and appreciate the compliments. I had a lot of good teachers through the years, and I learned probably as much from my grantees as I did from anybody else, and felt, great opportunity and great, just being welcomed in many different communities that I traveled to across the country, and experiencing all kinds of cultural interventions and activities personally. Being invited to sweat lodges and Eskimo steam baths and various types of ceremonies in different tribes. And so, and being a Lumbee tribal member myself, I understand the interworkings and politics and relationships and history of how things within a tribe can get are very positive and can also get very messy. So
Yeah, for sure. Well, I have to tell you, Andy, you're one of the people that I learned from. So I do thank you for your service and the work that you've done. And I'm happy that you're coming back into the circle after a little rest. Can you share with us, because this is the part that I think we're really excited about, is, system of care is not new for our tribal communities. But if you could share with the audience the history of how systems of care, in terms of like the funding for tribes through the federal initiative, if you could talk a little bit about how that began and what were some of those early discussions about.
Right. Yeah. Well, so I think it's people often tease me because when I start with a story, I start from the beginning of time. So I won't go quite that far back, but I think it's important to acknowledge that the system of care movement started in the 1980s with the CASP, or Child Adolescent Service System program, which started with the predecessor of SAMHSA, and that was really focused on states. They were state grants to help states increase the capacity and start changing systems, children's systems at the state level. It was strictly focused on states building capacity. Tribes were not included at all. So when SAMHSA started initiating the first system of care, child mental health initiative grants in the 90s, tribes were listed in the legislation as being eligible as a governmental entity. So it was states, tribes, territories, and other public entities. So tribes were eligible from the beginning, but as you might guess, because the states had all this sort of prep work for decades, they applied and they basically just got everything. There were very few grants. I think there were no grants the first couple of years to tribes. Then I believe it was 1994, the Navajo Nation was the first one to be funded. A few years later, Passamaquoddy tribe from Maine got funded, and also the United Technical Tribes College in North Dakota. So they were really the first tribal programs that got funded with System of Care. And as you can imagine, they were 3 out of, I think there were 40 or 50 grants in total, all states, counties, mostly states and counties, and then these 3 tribes. So when SAMHSA was doing the technical assistance, the technical assistance contract went to a DC-based TA contractor who had no knowledge or experience working in tribal communities. So these 3 tribal grantees were basically feeling like they had somebody come out to their community who had no idea what was going on, trying to help, but really not understanding it. And they basically complained to SAMHSA, said, look, this does not cut it for us. You need to do something different. So SAMHSA worked with IHS at the time in the late 90s, around 98 or so, to enter in a contract to provide technical assistance, culturally competent technical assistance to the tribal grantees. At the same time, there was an acknowledgement that tribes were at an unfair disadvantage for a number of reasons. Obviously, the capacity with the CAST program having really helped states shore up, tribes did not have that. So the Circles of Care planning grant was developed in cooperation with, originally it was a pilot program in 1998, 3-year grant with cooperation with SAMHSA, IHS, BIA, and Department of Justice, Office of Juvenile OJJDP. They got together and created Circles of Care, which helped a small number of tribes do this planning. The technical assistance for that program was extremely intense. I think Candace was there for some of the early stuff, but basically there were 2 twice a year in-person grantee meetings. There were multiple on-site TA meetings with tribes, and it was very intensive. Culture was integrated throughout. It was very culturally based, community based, and this program, Circles of Care, while it was a pilot, it eventually, because it was so successful, most of the grantees that got a Circles of Care grant later went on to get the System of Care grant to implement the plan that they developed in the Circles of Care. So when I think about the beginning of Circles of Care, it really does start with the fact that things were focused on states, tribes were kind of an afterthought, and then there was an acknowledgement of a group of leaders at the time to say we need to do something different for tribes, and Circles of Care was created. Also at the same time, the TA for the System of Care grantees was more tribally focused. So that's some of the stuff that happened at the kind of the early years of System of Care, and then Circles of Care continued to get funded. It was a battle every 3 years. Frankly, some of you who may have been part of those meetings might remember me saying that we need to demonstrate how impactful this has been, so we can continue to get this grant funded, because it was a discretionary grant, and there was always some pressure by some higher ups at SAMHSA to say, well, isn't that program over? Can't we use that money for something else? So luckily we were able to do that and continue. And Circles of Care is still around today. Maybe we can talk about how that's changed since it was at first. But those are, without rambling too much, that's kind of my history lesson.
Yeah, it seems like that there were some real turning points. I feel like the first one was acknowledging that the System of Care grant, as it was really created for states,
Right.
and the need for that kind of culturally competent systems of care. And I always think the first ones that go through have maybe the toughest time with it. So we appreciate the Navajo Nation and the Passamaquoddy tribe for being the trailblazers there. And then also another turning point I heard you talk about is the Circle of Care, and really allowing for that intensive culturally relevant TA in the planning for a system of care. And actually one of the speakers that's coming up after you is one of those communities, a tribal nation who was a Circle of Care and then then ended up moving into systems of care, but in a different way. Not necessarily with a system of care grant, but that was really important. And then that battle to fund the Circle of Care every 3 years. I also wanted to acknowledge Jill Erickson, because I know that she was in the early days of helping make sure that we had a Circle of Care, because we were having a hard time just rolling into implementation in 6 months. A lot of tribes need more time to plan their model and to get their infrastructure and capacity in place to be able to operate a system of care. And especially when our communities don't have a tax base often, we were at a disadvantage. And I felt like that old Circle of Care that we knew was really a huge help in that effort, and probably one of those turning points. Can you talk a little bit, because you started to kind of mention a little bit, what are some of the things that still today maybe challenge tribal nations in implementing systems of care from your experiences?
I would also just for a second like to sort of name check some important people. When I said I learned lessons, I would also like to, acknowledge Jill Erickson, who I actually replaced at SAMHSA. She was the first Native project officer at SAMHSA when Circles of Care started. She was really the fuel behind the fire at the SAMHSA level. Al Hyatt, who was at IHS at the time, he's long since retired. And then Terry Cross, who was my personal mentor and also the director at NICWA, who really pushed the whole tribal TA initiative. So, yes, as far as challenges today, I think one of the biggest challenges that I saw happening, I left SAMHSA in 2018, or was it 19? Maybe it's not, I think it was 19, and spent the last 2 years of my career at Indian Health Service. So I left SAMHSA 2019, basically more or less in protest of some of the changes that at the time administration was forcing on our grant programs, specifically Circles of Care, and specifically the loss of technical assistance for tribal communities. This started, I believe it was 2018. It might have been before that, but the loss of annual TA meetings. This virtual conference that we're having right now is great. Guess what, folks? For decades, we did this in person. We did this in person twice a year for decades. There was the general grantee meeting for system care where everybody was there, states, counties, tribes, territories, everybody was there. And then we always had a separate track for our tribal TA meetings, where we would be doing tribal focused meetings that we would do alongside of the general meetings for systems of care. Circles of Care was specifically for tribes. And again, we used to have 2 meetings a day. So to me, the greatest loss was that elimination of face-to-face TA. And this is pre-pandemic. So nobody can say, well, we stopped doing it because of pandemic restrictions. That's not true. Now that's the excuse, maybe. Excuse me for editorializing. But to me, that's the greatest loss and greatest challenge that tribes have, is the current TA that's provided to tribes is significantly less than it was. It's not as individualized. There is no face-to-face meetings where people can get together. We're Native people, and we value relationships and face-to-face and getting together, sharing, being together. It just doesn't, this is nice, but this just does not replace people being together and sharing space, the opportunity to share learning and, have side meetings in the hallway. Things get done in the hallway. People share stuff. To me, that's the biggest thing. The on-site TA, there's very little of that. And this, again, goes back to pre-pandemic decisions that were made by SAMHSA higher-ups to cut the TA, to change it. And basically, I could rail about this for a while, and I don't want to sound like a disgruntled employee, but when there's decades of success and we see what's working, and the tribes and the grantees say, TA works for us, we want this. And someone in the higher up of SAMHSA says, sorry, we're not doing that anymore. We're changing the way we do that. So now there's a TA center that basically just does some webinars and produces some documents. And that's the TA that you get. Maybe you'll talk to your project officer who's supposed to provide TA, but that's not the same. Project officer TA is different than TA from a TA contractor. And I should know because I've done both. Again,
yeah, I really appreciate this discussion because I also was one of the first, I guess we were in cycle 3 maybe when I came in for circles of care. And so I've experienced also from many perspectives as a person running the circle of care, as well as someone who's been evaluating. We've evaluated lots of circles and systems of care both. And that circle of care was so powerful to get the community ready to do it. And so we definitely have noticed the changes over time, and recognizing that one of the other thing that's happened, I guess this is a strength or positive thing, is that because the tribal nations have been implementing systems of care for so long, now they're like the expert technical people because they've got all these incredible programs and things that they have developed. And so I want to thank you, Captain Hunt, for being here. There's going to be some questions in the chat. I'm already seeing them come in. They're really good ones, and we're going to get to them. And I feel like you're going to have some things to weigh in on that. Also maybe with another panelist, Anitra, Dr. Warrior, here in a few minutes. But for the sake of time, I'm going to switch now to our next panel presenter to provide us a different perspective. And this is also, as I was sharing about how many of our tribal nations now have been doing this for so long, that they have become experts in areas and components of the system of care. I'm so happy to be able to be here today with Chairman Clyde Estes from the Kulwi-Chasho Oyate, which is one of the 7 council fires of the Oceti-Sakowin, from the Lower Brule Sioux tribe. And Chairman Estes has been a long-time boots-on-the-ground community member, driving a local system of care model in Lower Brule. And it's really been a joy for our team at One Fire Associates to work alongside Chairman Estes and his community since 2014 in using evaluation for data-driven decision-making and quality improvement. And in 2016, Chairman was elected to the Tribal Council, where he served until he was elected to the chair, whereas in 2020, and he is still currently the chair of the council. And through all these years, he's been a champion for system of care in the Lower Brule community. And now through his leadership position, really has the opportunity to advance system of care at the law and policy level. And so we're all very honored and blessed to have Chairman Estes here today to share with us his knowledge, experience, and lessons in implementing system of care as a tribal nation leader. So welcome, Chairman Estes. I'm really happy that you're able to join us here today.
Good evening or good afternoon, greetings. Greet you all with a good heart and a good handshake. And I want to start with it was very powerful and emotional to hear Dr. Hunt, Captain Hunt's remarks. Being in tribal leadership, you're pulled 1,000 different ways, and sometimes you lose a little bit of connection with the important people that you deal with, and a lot of the things that was going on at SAMHSA I wasn't aware of, and it's pulls on my heart to know that because technical assistance is a very very important part to implement a good program. And I think Captain Hunt, Dr. Vargas, Aaron Thinelk. There was another gentleman, I can see his face, I can't remember his name. Claude Tuelk, Joshua Estes, our Circle of Care board. That's what I start out with. First of all, I want to say on behalf of our tribe, our people, our employees, and most of our sacred Wakayas, our children, thank you for this opportunity to address you in this capacity as the Tancha of my Oyate. It's a great honor that I've been given and by Tukashla and Wakantaka and the people. As you know, in 2020, with COVID, it changed all of our worlds, our lives, how we interact. There's still so much that we don't know how it's impacted our children, our youth. And it's something I think that it's in the back of our minds. Maybe we don't discuss it enough. The impacts, the long-term, short-term impacts, especially when we had to close our schools down, we had to close down community gatherings, and how that really impacted their feelings about the society they live in. And I'm sure, as all of us as people who care about our youth and our future, that's something that we'll have to continue to study and keep an eye on. But first of all, I want to say thank you to Dr. Vargas for being a champion and being a very good partner to us here at the Kui Chasha Oyate. I've known her, I'm blessed to know her since 2016, but I think the work might have started in like 2015 when they had the first, or maybe it was in 2016. I'm sorry, it's so far back.
A while.
We met in our convention center back home and did the first kind of a opening and kind of a little, I don't know what you call it. We did the string thing. I remember that.
Weaving connections.
Yeah. And that's where it all started for me, becoming and getting involved, because before I became a council member in 2016, I worked at the Lord Bruce schools for 7 years. In ISS, football coach, basketball coach, athletic director. So, and growing up in this community and being a part of it, it's been an honor for me and a real eye opener coming from the school into tribal government to keep addressing our youth needs, because they are our future, and we have to do everything we can to make that future as safe as possible. But before I go on further, I know we didn't open this with a prayer, and as I was sitting there listening to Captain Hunt and Jamie talk, I in our culture, spirituality is a really big part, and I would just like to say a quick opening prayer, if that's okay.
Please. Thank you. Wodong.
O tu kasla wa kantaka wopila tanka lila washtelo ampetu tu omakia itancha wichasha wia kasla omakia the oyate omakia wakaya jatu kasla. Kasla, we come to you today with good hearts and good minds and good spirits to discuss the good things that all of us in one heart and one mind and one love are coming together for our oyates, for our people, for our nations. And most of all, for the future of our nations, for our Wakayaja, that we can come together in a good way to discuss good things and how we can work together to address these things for their future, to Kashla. We ask that you bless everybody on this call, this summit today, this meeting, and those who are doing the work every day to take care of our Wakayaja, to keep them safe, to provide nurturing, loving environments and homes and food and spiritual and cultural knowledge to Kashla. We ask that you continue to bless everybody and the work they do, and especially our communities. We ask that you guide our hearts and minds in a good way to keep doing these good things and to leave good tracks to follow for our predecessors, for those who will come after us, that these good works that have started will continue on long after we're gone, so we can be living in a more healing, balanced environment, a more peaceful environment, a more loving environment, a more cultural sensitive and more spiritual environment for our Wakayaja. To Kashla, I give you thanks for everybody here today and ask that you bless them wherever they may be, whether they're at their office, they're at their home, they're in their cars, whether they're on an airplane, that you bless them in their travels and bless the work they do. And we give you all the thanks for this honor for us to meet together in this way. Oh, we dock you, Oyas.
Oh, Wopila. Thank you very
Yep.
much, Chairman Estes. I think about the what tribal nations have done, and you just exhibited that in terms of one of the things that tribal nations have offered is into the larger system of care knowledge is the importance of spirituality, language, and culture in the work that we do. And for us as evaluators, one thing that we recognize as a part of the sustainability for tribes is really that culture matters and language matters. And so I appreciate you bringing in, and for us, culture is spirituality. So thank you for bringing that to us today and giving us these blessings through the prayer. And I know everyone on the call are also doing hard work. They're here trying to learn something new, and they're out there doing good work in their own communities. And so I hope that this prayer that you offered also brings good energy to them and the work that they do. And this is also a nice segue. We've talked about this concept, society of care, and I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more about why that name, Society of Care, is so significant.
Thank you, Dr. Workers. Yes, I was thinking about that. And it goes back to we as Lakota or Nakota, Dakota, or whatever indigenous nation we come from, that there was societies, male societies, female societies, Wakaya, children's societies, gray, one that comes to mind like a Gray Eagle Society, Kit Fox Society. My grandfather, who was a priest for 40 years, but was really knowledgeable of his culture and his language and things. He always talked about the different societies and roles and um, how specific they were to those things, especially for the Akichita. He was a World War II vet as well. And society to me has more meaning and it seems more, if you want to say, culturally relevant than systems. When we talk about systems, and this is nothing, uh, no, it should be not taken as a racist statement, but when we talk about systems, it's more of a non-native term. It's uh, when we talk about systems, we go back to our beginnings and the colonization and all that stuff, and how that we know that some systems just do not work for us tribal nations. And society has, to me, it feels more culturally relevant. um I can't remember the Lakota word right now for society, but it just it brings more meaning to what, like, the society of care we're trying to do. And the Kuichasha were part of the Sakanju, the nation of the Ocheti Shakon of the Seven Council Fires. We have the upper Bruleys and the lower Bruleys, our brothers and sisters over on the Rosebud Reservation. They're considered the upper Bruleys, and we're considered the lower Bruleys. And we split uh, years ago, many years ago, but we're still related. We're all related some way, somehow. And when we talk about the society of care, where we came from, and I'm thankful for the opening statement that we started with the Circles of Care program. And I want to give a lot of credit to our CHIA, friend Claude Tuelk, who took over on that program for a while and brought a lot of cultural and spiritual knowledge and really emphasized that culture is medicine part, and that the love is the most important medicine um, that we can share with one another. He was very he's still alive, so I don't want to use him in the past tense, but he was very adamant about that. And if there's one thing we take away from that is the love our relatives and our ancestors and our nachas and our unchis and inas and ates had, was that love. That's what brought us forward to as human beings and being nurtured in that right way. So that is very important. And I think when the difference between system and society, how much love do you feel in a system compared to a society? If you want to look at it in those terms, that as our native indigenous relatives and nations, societies have a lot of meaning, and it just it, it makes more relevance here. And when I took over, I remember I pushed, even before I took over. Actually, it was my last term as a council member. before I ran for the chairmanship, I implored our council at that time to pass the Society of Care model. It was Systems of Care, but I said, let's change that to Society of Care, because whether or not we go for the funding, the framework is there, and that's what is the most important part. And I'm happy to say that last year they started meeting, and I've been so busy as chairman, I haven't got to attend them, but I have a couple council members that do attend them for me and report back. And we're really pushing the collective and the collaborative working relationship that is so enticed with Society of Care model. It's the model is the framework, and it's just keeping that circle connected. That is so important.
Mhm.
In my experience as a community member, now a tribal leader, and seeing that importance of Society of Care is because issues happening on our native nations and reservations and communities, it's just not a one program, a one person, a one entity issue. We had a community meeting last week, and I spoke about it's not a tribal council and a law enforcement issue, it's a community issue. And the more collective, collaborative, teamwork approach you have to things, the better off we all are. It's sharing that responsibility for the health and the welfare of your people in your community, but it's also imploring your community and your tribal members, your fellow tribal members, to become involved, to know that they have a role and a place in our society to play, to watch out over each other, especially the children, because they're always watching us and they need us to protect them and guide them in a good way.
Mhm.
And with the importance of that Society of Care, it's um, all these different programs that are structured here to help our people, whether they feel that's not part of their contract or grant. To me, that's irrelevant. I always stress the point here as a tribal leader that we're all here for the people. We're not here for ourselves or our families or nothing like that. We're here to service the people. We're here to serve the people, and that's the goal, and to make sure we're providing those services to the best of our abilities, and that we learn from our mistakes. But the most important concept I push as a tribal leader is teamwork. I told them it's not about me. If anything, I said I get my strength from each and every one of my employees, or our employees, my fellow tribal members, and I take no credit for nothing. I give all that credit where it's deserved, and I believe in giving credit where credit is due, and that's to all of us having one mind, one heart mentality. If you don't have that, I truly feel that no matter how much good you're trying to do, if you don't have that collectiveness, it's not going to work, and you're going to keep running into the wall and back to the same circle. You're going to keep spinning wheels on the same issue and never get anywhere.
Yeah.
And some of the biggest challenges and barriers we have faced in the Society of Care uh, was getting started, was getting all these programs that are supposed to be here. And I sent a directive out to all the tribal programs that are supposed to be part of that. I said, if you're not, you're going to face some pretty adverse consequences from me. And I don't want to go that way. And I shouldn't have to reprimand you to get you to go something you're going to need to go to, because it's having them, what I just talked about, or that understanding about what this Society Care model means to our community. And it starts with us as leaders and program directors and program employees by collectively working together. Um, so that took shape now, and they're getting it. They're really getting involved. The other barrier is the government entities that work on a reservation. As many of you fellow tribal members and tribal leaders know, you have a lot of government agencies on your reservation, whether it be BIA law enforcement, IHS, BIA, and they feel, because they're not under us in a sense, because their directives come from different government entities, they feel that they really don't have to be there, or it's not uh, their responsibility to be there. But I don't believe in that. I believe you're part of this community. Your job is to service the people in this community. So you should be at the table, especially IHS, because as being healthcare providers, BIA, because you're assisting tribal members with government to government relationship things, whether it be land or probates or whatever it may be. And law enforcement is always a tough one because, as all of us that live in tribal communities know, a lot of times our tribal law enforcement is shorthanded, but they play the biggest role, I believe, in our society care, because they have to respond to things that deal with that are relevant to society care, especially mental health issues, um, traumas, suicides, children issues. And so they are a very, very important part to the society of care model. And I've always implored our chief, and who I have a very, really good working relationship with him and his officers, to always get into the schools as much as they can when things are good, to have our children get to know the police officers in a more of a friendly way, instead of them having to see them come to their house and arrest mom or dad or with their siblings or themselves for the trouble they might fall into. So I said, that way you're establishing those relationships so these children understand they can feel safe coming to you, knowing you're here to protect them. And I will always push on that. So that's uh, in a nutshell. In the barriers, like I said, we really shored up that tribal program side to have our programs involved in this SOC model and understanding what it's all about. And then it's that government side, those government agencies, to say you're important at this table and you need to be here, and we need to have your input, and we need to know if you're committed to work with us, because you're put here to serve the people, and they cannot forget that. And to touch on some of the successes here for the Society of Care is, like I said, we got it off the ground now. Um, of course, there's a lot of things that go on in our communities. Uh, we just got done with a very long, harsh winter, um, caused us to cancel school and work a few days. Um, as every community, you have loved ones pass away. In a small community like ours, it affects everybody. So meetings get pushed back and things, and uh, you have different employers or employees coming and going, and directors. And I want to touch real quick back to number 3. Don't mean to jump around here. Is one of the other barriers is when you have good employees and directors come in, and for some reason, whether they're offered a better job opportunity or somewhere, or they're at the retirement age, or something happens in their lives and they feel it's time for them to move on, we lose that valuable experience. And that's really hard to come back from, because of the knowledge and that, I don't know how you would say it, that person that you could count on to be there to help facilitate. When you lose those people, it's very hard to replace. And when I talked, excuse me, earlier about getting our community involved, that was my part of telling our community, now is your chance to get involved, to be involved, and to learn these things, because these things we want to be here forever to take care of our people. And the more you're involved, the better off we all are. And you can feel your input and your opinions are valued, that you do play a major part in our tribe, in our community. And no voice should be go unheard, especially the elders, the parents, and especially the youth and the teenager. So on that barrier issue, when you have a small workforce and you lose one important piece of the puzzle, it's very hard. And us as tribal leaders and tribal members, we have to just try to make do with what we have.
Oops.
And I think all of our tribal communities can attest to that. When especially when you have a lot of longevity and a lot of your tribal employees with all that knowledge, uh, when you lose that, you lose a big part of your community. But the success is like I said, we got the Society of Care meeting started. We haven't gone after the grant yet, but getting them just to say, hey, do we really need this grant right now to get started? To just do what our programs were here to design to do from the start, which is to serve our people, is to get them to reach out for help. And if we can help them, let's help them. If not, let's refer them to somebody who can get them the help that they need. Because I said, by all of us working together, it'll show that our employees here are not here just for a paycheck, are not here to be this or that, but we're here because we care, and that we want our community to be healthy. We want it to be safe, and we need the community to come and help us. I've always say that um, as a tribal leader, I know the tribal leaders are always, whether something good or bad happens on the reservation, it's always your fault. And that's not necessarily the case all the time, that it's a community issue. And the more that you get the people to understand that and explain that in a role that their input, their help is what helps us and supporting us and most of all praying for us. I always ask them that. I said, you don't know how much words like that mean to us as well as leaders. Um, whether it be hang in there, good job, or just how you doing, or hey, I'm praying for you. Because as tribal leaders, you take a very, I don't want to say beating, but you take a lot on. And when you open your heart to your people, you're allowing your heart to be hurt also.
Yeah.
Because you have to take the good with the bad. But as long as you know you're doing it for the right reason, the good always outweigh the bad. But us as tribal leaders, and I'm sure other tribal leaders can attest to this, it's a very, very tough job. But you have to understand that when you run for these positions. And like I said, I feel very blessed and fortunate to be put here where I am by Tukashla Wakantaka, speaking to the hearts and minds of the Oyate to have that faith in me. And no matter what happens after this term, I'll always have the love and the care and the concern for my people. Especially as a first responder, I'm also a firefighter, was a former EMT. So all my jobs and all my life since I started working have all been community service jobs, giving back to my community. That's how I was raised. And so when we go back to those foundational levels, and I'm really hoping that this is something the society care model can do, is working back and going back to those foundational models that our ancestors and our grandparents and parents taught us. When we get away from those things, that's when we start seeing those very negative societal impacts in our communities. And as you all know, it's everywhere, just not in Indian country, with the guns, the drugs, the violence, and it's just, we're like, what's going on with our world?
Yeah,
Uh,
for
we
sure.
have to stay strong and we have to stay faithful in prayer and ask Tukashla to help us, um, guide us, and to help our people.
Yeah.
And also, real quick on the natural helpers, I just had the superintendent of the schools in here a few minutes ago signing diplomas. We have 19 seniors graduating tomorrow. Really good to see those numbers going up. And I asked him real quick to give me a quick update on our natural helpers. He said there's like 19 to 20 of them, and they've been doing phenomenal work. They just had their awards day ceremony for their spring activities, and the natural helpers were honored and thanked for the work they do, working with their peers, with their fellow students, working on suicide prevention, cultural um, programs, hand games, and more or less being those peer supporters to their peers. And thankful for Mrs. Schaefer, Jessica with PFS running, working with them. Um, and I've always said that to our children, is our outgoing seniors, is and the juniors, I always say, most important thing you do is leave good tracks to follow. Set an example, be that role model for them. So I'm very, very thankful for our natural helpers, our young teenagers that are stepping up into these roles, which they don't even realize it is human services work
Yeah.
in a sense. And to take and learn and grow from that experience and to give back and to help them get out of their shell, because we were all teenagers once. We know what it's like to be bashful and put on the spotlight in front of your peers, your classmates, and how they're going to perceive you or what you're going to say. And so I'm very, very proud of these young men and women that have took on the challenge to be uh, the natural helpers in our community to help address the things that their fellow classmates and peers are going through. Because as we've seen, Now with the social media and how it's affected our youth is something else. I'm so thankful we didn't have cell phones in my days. I'm only 47, but I couldn't imagine the distraction. And we're seeing a societal shift in our youth because I want to say a big part of social media, and its relevance to common issues that are going on with our juveniles. And this is something I'm gonna keep pushing on our Society of Care team here to keep addressing and to keep having more community events and awareness. And like tomorrow, we have the United States Attorney's Office trying to get the Highway Patrol here, the FBI or the marshals, to talk to our students before school gets out next week about bullying, about internet, about social media, uh, about making good choices while you're young, to try to tell them that and bullying that there's those are unacceptable ways of life, and that they're here because not to get after you, but to that they care about you and to try to tell you that's uh, that's not the path you want to start going down at a young age, because we're seeing more juvenile crimes, serious crimes, including guns, drugs everywhere. And like I said, I don't think it's just a native tribal community issue, as we're seeing throughout the United States. Uh, and so that's what I said. I'm very thankful that they're all coming down to take time tomorrow to address our middle school, high school students about the seriousness of these issues and to get them to think before they act. And that then, if anything, also that these are possible careers for them, whether they want to be FBI agents or U.S. Marshals or highway patrolmen and women and U.S. attorneys or whatever. So I'm very, very thankful for these partnerships. But um, like I said, I want to just give credit where credit's due. And I want to thank everybody that supported Lord Sioux Tribe, all the people that I probably can't name off the top of my head. Like you said, Dr. Vargas, Captain Hunt. And I still wish I can remember the other gentleman's name that was providing us TA. I think Jamie could remember his name. Ponytail, long hair, glasses.
Bird, John Bird.
Could be. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
I'm sorry. There's a lot of really great TA people out there doing great work.
Yes, and like I said, I just want to say thank you on behalf of our people, our tribe,
Thank
and
you.
all those who've been involved with the child circles of care that went to Society of Care. Kylie Estes, um, there was so many,
So many.
and I'm so thankful to each and every one of you, because this is something uh, that is designed to help our people and
Mhm.
and to um, increase positive results in our community. But the most important thing that means the most to me is improving that longevity in life for our youth and for our community, to make good, healthy decisions, and to know that there is a lot of good people out in this world and in this community that care and love you and that want to see you succeed, and that our community is what we make it.
Yeah.
And if there's anything we can learn from the systems of care and working together, getting better together and building systems better, our societies better, it's that the whole concept is to make your community better as a whole. So you're a healthy, safe nation. So wopila tamka, pilame apila.
Opila, thank you very much. Waddell Chairman Estes. I just wanted to mention, well, one, I think the strength of the work you're doing is because you've changed the name to Society of Care and you're implementing those cultural values and strengths to the work that you're doing to work together as a whole, as one. And I also wanted to indicate or mention that you all did get a Circle of Care grant, but you did not go after the System of Care grant, and yet we know that System of Care is not a grant. It's a philosophy about the way we do business. And you guys move forward in implementing the System of Care model even without the System of Care grant. And I understand that you're implementing those models throughout a lot of the programs and services that you're offering. And so that it's really about, instilling that value and framework. And I also just wanted to mention, we're really proud of your natural helpers. I wish we had a whole hour. I wish we had a whole day just to hear from you and your community about the natural helper programs. But as your evaluators, we see they're making a difference in the lives of young people in their schools and in their community. And we're so proud of them. I think they're going to be presenting at Unity, so I can't wait to hear how that goes. But thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us. I also want to thank our hosts, because they said they're going to leave this session open longer, because we still have 3 more panelists to get to, and we're doing our best, but yet we have a lot to share on these really important topics. And so now I'm going to welcome, and we're very happy that Eddie Screechow was able to join us today. Eddie is the Senior Director with the Indian Child Welfare Programs at Casey Family Programs. He's also a long-term advocate for Indigenous youth in foster care. And Eddie and I first started working together, over a decade ago, back when we were both working with to really advance Indigenous children's mental with the system of care in Oklahoma, so that we could get culturally relevant, meaningful access to services for Indigenous children, youth, and families. And now Eddie is working nationally to advance effective programming using system of care framework for Indigenous youth in foster care. One initiative called Culture Forward is working to bring culture forward as the resources and solutions for addressing the problem of suicide. And we recognize that suicide is really, when you start to peel back the layers of the onion, suicide is really a symptom of trauma, grief, and loss that many of our peoples and communities are still facing. And so thank you for joining us today, Eddie. We're happy that you're here with us.
Hello, Jamie. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. And when Jamie had invited me to participate in this panel, gosh, a few months ago, I was like, yes, sign me up. And then before I started preparing here recently for this presentation, I was thinking, well, how is my work connected to systems of care? And I was like, I don't know if I fit in with this panel after I saw who else was presenting. And, I appreciated Captain Hunt and Chairman Estes kind of laying the groundwork and the foundation for systems of care, society of care. And two, as I prepared last night for this presentation, I thought, yes, what I do at Casey does fit. And that's why Jamie asked me to be a part of the panel. And so at Casey Family Programs, our mission is to provide, improve, and ultimately prevent the need for foster care. And in the work that I do, we've been committed to supporting tribal nations and strengthening their capacity to keep their children healthy, safe, and connected with their families, communities, and cultures. And to accomplish this, I've realized we just don't use the language that a system of care approach is needed. And we have been doing that in the work that we do with our tribal nations that we partner with. To keep children from entering foster care, we know that a system of care approach is needed. We know that families need the supports and services that help them to be healthy and safe. One of our initiatives at Casey, it's a newer initiative, is called Building Communities of Hope. And for the team that I work with, Indian Child Welfare Programs, our part of that is helping tribes build tribal communities of hope. It's a nationwide effort to prevent the need for foster care by supporting families in raising safe, happy, and healthy children. Building communities of hope is a systems of care approach. It's just we don't use that language. And I'm familiar with systems of care. When I worked for my tribe years and years ago, Muskogee Nation, we also had a circles of care initiative happening at that time, so I'm familiar with that, but not recently in the work that I do, but that's what we're doing now. And to achieve our vision of building communities of hope, it requires a shared responsibility among leadership in what we know 5 sectors of society: government, business, nonprofit, faith-based, philanthropic organizations, and the community members. So those people that are in the community, it takes a joint effort working together to build hope for the children and families within the communities. And so as I started thinking about the work that I do and the partners that we work with, the most successful that we've seen have been using a systems of care approach, a society of care approach. And so it does take that coordination of services among agencies, across agencies, to work with children and families that come into contact with child welfare agencies. And so all of those agencies at the tribe in particular have to work strategically together to provide those supports so that they can effectively address the needs of children and families. And so, and it is about various agencies sharing resources and responsibilities, working together. You need the full participation of all those professionals at those various agencies, the families, the children and youth, and stakeholders within the community to be all a part of helping families meet, helping them to meet their needs and address their needs. And so, as I said, I think in the work that we do, I have seen tribes really be successful at reducing the number of children that come into the foster care systems. Port Gamble Slalom tribe in Washington is one, and they don't actually use that terminology, their systems of care, but it's what they've been doing. And gosh, they have another term that I've heard in the past, a one-stop shop, that they have a facility where all of their health and well-being services are located, easily accessible. And so so families come there. They may see a therapist. They may see somebody about assistance with utilities and food. Um, so it's all there. And since they've been implementing this approach, coordinating, working with the various agencies there, the number of children in their foster care has reduced from about 83 to currently 12. They're a smaller tribe, so that's huge for them. And it was about this systems of care approach that they were using.
Thanks, Eddie. And I also agree that I will look at the work that you're doing. And even though people may not call it system of care, there may be other terms that are more appropriate, because we know that systems is not really necessarily a term that really comes from the indigenous framework. And so making these name shifts are also a form of self-determination in the work that we do. And, you know, the reason why those system of care, the values and principles of system of care are the underlying things that really make a difference. You know, those three core values of being youth and family driven, community based, culturally linguistically competent, and then all the great principles around integrated care, least restrictive environment, which definitely ties into, you know, trying to prevent kids from being in foster care placements or adopted out from their families. And so I wonder if you could speak just a little bit about some of the maybe biggest challenges and barriers that you all have faced in trying to take the system of care approach in whatever name is used to serve Indigenous youth in foster care.
Yes, and I think some of these challenges and barriers that you're all going to be familiar with, siloing. So particularly when it comes to child welfare agencies, CPS, Child Protective Services, often there's a stigma to those agencies, and it's an agency that families don't want to become involved with. And you know, that myth of CPS is that that's the agency that takes children away. And and we've seen that in the various tribal communities that we've worked with, is there's still some siloing going on though. That the CPS agency is off by itself. And so that they at times struggle to refer their families that they're working with to other resources. And we all know why too, a lack of resources within tribal communities. And that can be because of capacity of that program, staff turnover, limited funding, all of those that we know. And so all of those challenges that we're familiar with, and then access to resources. And so we know in some tribal communities, families may have to drive hours to access services. And so, like counseling services, substance abuse services, they may not have that in their community, and they have to drive to another city. And then that service provider doesn't understand Indigenous people, traditions, cultures, their way. And so that is another challenge too, when our children and families have to go off reservation for services. And again, yes, this isn't new. So but that's what we're seeing with the population that we work with too. And so it
Yeah.
is about access, accessing services when they're available, if they're available, and then also coordinating with other programs there that can help keep children out of foster care system, away from coming into contact with CPS.
Yeah. And that, breaking down silos and working together is also what we heard Chairman Estes sharing too on the local level. I do want to recognize as something that you shared was just about there is a lot of mental health services for Indigenous peoples, but maybe they don't know about our communities or how to serve us. And there is something that you all are working on there at Casey Family Programs that we're really proud about also. And it's the Culture Forward Coalition and the idea of bringing culture forward to address some of these issues that we're facing and the role of culture in that. So I wonder if you could just speak a little bit about the Culture Forward initiative and the coalition so we can maybe think about how to get people connected.
Yes, and I always love talking about this project. And so, and we know that many tribal communities experience high rates of suicide. We know the data, national data shows that Indian youth face higher rates of teenage suicide than other populations, sometimes 3 times greater. And so, in about, I think, 2018, in partnership with John Hopkins Center for American Indian Health, I know they're not called that any longer, but we partnered with them to develop a guide, a Culture Forward. It's a strength and culture-based tool to protect our Native youth from suicide, and that was released in 2021. And so it's available online. The goal of this guide and consequently the Culture Forward Coalition is to elevate Indigenous knowledge, findings, and practical proven resources that represent strengths and culture-based approaches proven effective in Native communities to prevent and reduce suicide. And so from this project, we wanted to continue the momentum. So our CEO president at Casey Family Programs, Dr. William Bell, asked us to, well, let's take the next step, and that is to develop a national coalition, Forward Coalition, so that we can continue to identify what's working in Indian country around suicide prevention and intervention. Traditions, culture-based approaches, strengths-based what's already working in tribal communities. And so he asked us, let's develop a coalition. And so we did do that. And so we've been in the process of developing this coalition. This coalition is comprised of experts in the field, professionals in the field of health, social services, and child welfare. And the goal is to raise awareness of what's working in Indian country around suicide prevention and intervention. And so we welcome anyone that's interested in learning about these resources, also sharing about what you're doing in your communities too. And so we're trying to elevate that. Instead of reinventing the wheel, we're trying to elevate that. Another aspect of our work that we're beginning to focus on is connecting with philanthropic organizations. And so, yeah, we can share about what's working and how do you get it into a community though? Well, to do that, you need money, you need dollars. And so we're going to try to connect with philanthropic organizations who now in across the country are becoming more interested in having a footprint in Indian country. And so a prime opportunity to elevate the needs of Indian in tribal communities around suicide prevention and intervention. And so that's another aspect of the coalition. And so we meet monthly via Zoom. And so it is open to, like I said, any experts, professionals interested in learning, sharing, and accessing these resources.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Eddie. I actually have the link to the Culture Forward Coalition contract. I'm going to, the contact form, I'm going to put it in the chat. And then if folks are interested and you want to join the coalition, please do so. I'm a member of the coalition and I've been learning a lot about the different practices that are out there working. And I always think about how, we're in this world of evidence-based practices, and sometimes it doesn't always work well for our tribal communities because a lot of them are Western driven. And to be able to have a place and a forum to be able to bring these culturally based practices that are really working to the forefront and bring that visibility to them is really important. And I just think about a lot of the programs, like even the Natural Helper program that's in the lower rural community. Wow, the whole world needs to hear about what they're doing and think about how they might be able to adapt that and use it because it's working. And there is on the ground evidence that they're making a difference. And so I did put that in the chat there. I hope folks can see the link. Oh, wait, I think I did it in the Q&A. Sorry, I need to put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Let me put it in the chat here. And so if folks want to fill out the Survey Monkey link, you can get connected to the coalition. And so I just want to thank you, Eddie, for your great work. And also thanks for KC Family Programs for your efforts to make sure that you're being a champion for children in foster care and for the prevention of that and for safe, healthy families and keeping kids safe in their home communities. So thank you very much, Wodo. I now want to, I know we are a little behind, but the facilitators very kindly recognize that this is such a Jedi panel that we have a lot of things to offer in these different areas. And so I just want to say, a special welcome. It's a pleasure to be here with Dr. Anitra Warrior. And Dr. Warrior is an indigenous psychologist from the Ponca tribe in Oklahoma. She's now a community member in Nebraska. Dr. Warrior founded a private practice, Morning Star Counseling, that has grown now to 26 people with 7 clinic locations and lots of contracted providers across the state of Nebraska. Anitra supported the advancement of a nonprofit, Healing Roots Counseling and Training Center, Inc., that was established as a result of the need for behavioral health services for BIPOC communities in Nebraska. Anitra leads the Grow Our Own Camp, which includes mentorship across the country for American Indian scholars, and has developed a partnership with tribal colleges in Nebraska to recruit high school and college students into the field of psychology. Anitra is working with the Santee Sioux Society of Care in Nebraska to provide mental health care delivery to Indigenous youth statewide, and she's using both telehealth and in-person services to do that. Anitra is also a champion for the Society of Care, and we're really happy to hear more about her experience in administering and providing clinical services under this framework. Dr. Warrior, welcome.
Thank you, Jamie. It's such a pleasure to be here and to hear from the other panelists and learn from them. Again, thank you so much. So where I'm going to start is talking about culturally adapted services. And I have to go back, and as we talk about, or we bring this forward in terms of culture first, that's who we are first. We are Native first. I'm Ponca first. And that's always going to be there for me. When I think about things, I think about it through the lens of a Ponca woman. And, language is such a major part of that. So when I talk about how we're doing these practices with culture first, or in a culturally adapted manner, what I'm going to share today are going to be like some practical steps that you can literally just leave today from today's session and say, okay, team, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to change. And so I hope that with what I share, those are things that can be done. I appreciate Chairman Estes and what he shared in terms of the language and changing to Society of Care. In my work with Isanti, we also use Society of Care. And for me as a Ponca woman within our tribe, societies have responsibilities to the community. So we have a Heloshka society that is made up of men from our community, and they have a responsibility to us as well. And so to me, that's really important as we think about not just a system of care, because we know what's happened with systems and what systems have done to us, not for us. And that's the difference to me when I think of a society. The Society of Care is they are doing work for us. And that's who I get the privilege to be a part of. So another piece there with language. In addition to that, when we talk about the work that we do, or when we do case consultation, or we're having to do any type of reporting, we also say relative. Sorry about that. We say relative for those that we're serving. You don't hear us say client, you don't hear us say patient. And the reason being is because the work that we're doing, it is an honor to be a part of this journey of healing with this individual. It's such an intimate relationship when you think about what goes into counseling and the time spent with one another. That relationship, which is key to change when you're working with a therapist, that should be honored and respected in high regard, which is why we use that term relative. And, we had some team members, who struggled with that. And it was, well, if you're going to say that, that means you need to be available outside of hours. You're absolutely right. And we absolutely are. And that's a change. And so when you think about systems or clinical systems or the medical model that is often used within our communities, that doesn't fit. That's not culture first. It doesn't fit for us. And that system is what needs to adapt to what we provide. So other ways that we do this, and things that I hope that you can take is, the other part would be looking at how we operate our services. So when we talk about things like supervision, we are very, very in tune with those that we're serving and how our clinicians are responding to communities. So we have a very long onboarding process. That's not going to be something that everyone can do, but within our agency, our onboarding process is about 30 days. And with that onboarding process, you are going to get a lot of didactics. You'll learn about ICWA. You'll learn about the tribal communities. You're going to do tours of the communities. You're going to do some volunteer work in the communities. You're also going to do some self-disclosure to start developing relationships within the communities. The reason for this is because all of our providers, all of our team needs to be integrated into the community. They need to be accepted in the community. They also need to feel like they're part of the community. And that's happened for us. Our psychologists can go into the gas station or go to the tribal college, and they're being called out in those public places, and people are wanting to talk to them. But that's because of the requirement of our society to the communities that we're serving. So that's one of the things that we do when it comes to supervision and the expectations of our clinicians. Now, the other piece is, we can use culture as almost like a triage, emotional triage, sometimes a safety effort. We've had situations where we've had to have emergency sweats for individuals that were in a state of crisis or that had a full plan on how they were going to take their lives. And we were able to use culture to support us. And the clinical component was still part of that, because as we're doing this, we still have to think about our license, but culture first. Right. And so we use those beliefs, those traditions that we don't lead those. That would not be appropriate for me to try and lead a sweat or other types of ceremonies within our tribal communities, but finding out who that relative is comfortable with and leading that. And then we'll make the contact. We'll cover the cost of food. We will cover the cost of supplies, but we're going to make sure that happens. So that's also really important to us. Gift giving, and in our tribal communities with our tribal nations, that's a part of who we are. We give when we're grieving. We give when we're honored. We give when we're asked to do something. That's a part of who we are. And that's something that we do within our clinic. So getting so far in treatment, making major milestones in your life, we're going to give you, what might be appropriate. We had someone recently who just had a baby. We gave them a star quilt. We'll have baby boards made. But that's a part of our integration. That's a part of who we are. And that's honoring that relationship and treating them as relatives. So those are some of the things that we do within our clinic. And then, of course, we have our our like TFCBT is a major part of the work that we do, and we do utilize the culturally adapted version that all of our team actually is required to do that training through the OU Health Sciences Center with the Indian child. Oh my gosh.
Indian Country Child Trauma Center. It's okay.
With D, yes, with Dr. D Bigfoot.
Yeah.
All of our providers are required to go through that training. And then we come back and we process that. And we do regular consultation, even outside of the supervision that's provided for them. So, but it's culture first. And what I can say about our people across tribal nations is the level of adaptability that we have. That's one of our major strengths. When I think about my own people, Poncas moving from Nebraska or being forced to walk from Nebraska to Oklahoma and adapting to the new terrain, adapting to the different type of dirt that is there. We did it. We adapted. And that's part of what we have to do within our clinics. And it's part of it is also ownership. Taking ownership of what we provide to our communities, what we know, what traditional knowledge is there, and incorporating that and making that reflective also in your policies and procedures. So I've shared a number of things that we've been able to do to help people feel comfortable with our services. The other piece when I talk about community integration is that we sponsor a lot of different events. So we've had esports tournaments. We're very active on social media. We have community events where there's just dancing, like with hip hop dancing, all of that, because we recognize that there are cultural groups within our own culture, and we have to acknowledge those, the things that happen on social media, the different types of music that people listen to. At one of our clinics, right across the street is a skate park. Guess what? We're integrating skate park and mental health, and we're going to be talking about it. We're on the radio talking about it. So it's like in every aspect of life, you're going to see us there. That's huge, because with this, you're also reducing stigma that's associated with behavioral health services. And this is huge. So now we have people asking us to come and talk to their tribal agencies, which is, huge for us. So although we're doing all of these different things, there are still challenges that we're going to see, okay, especially when we're talking about grants. So the 80% that we have to get with the NOMs, and it has to be the interviews, it cannot be the administrative interviews. And so that's a challenge. That is a significant challenge for us that, I will be honest, we have not been able to overcome. But I will tell you this as well. Although I'm thankful for the funding, I am not going to sell my soul, change my values as a Ponca woman to force these interviews to be done. I can't do it, and I won't do it. And what that means is, we are looking at what grants do we need to step away from and look at other streams of income to support the work that we do and how we do it. So it's difficult when, we have a high number of people without insurance. So what does that mean, and how we're going to keep our doors open? Well, guess what? As the Society of Care, it is our responsibility to figure it out. It's our responsibility to take care of our community, to provide those services. That's why we use that term, Society of Care. So that means we're going to be doing presentations, we're going to be doing fundraising, we're going to be reaching out to foundations, and we're going to do a ton of partnership. With the Society of Care funds, we are able to use that to partner with schools to do so much more work in ways that can supplement, to support people who do not have insurance. We have those ways, and that's because of that integration of our society with the systems that are within our communities. That partnership, working together, is huge in how we're able to sustain our services. So that's a big challenge when it comes to the reporting. The other piece that is a major challenge for us is attendance. And we have a high rate of no-shows. However, the relationships are strong enough that I may work with someone for 5 years and I may see them 4 times a year. But guess what? They're coming at those times when they are most in stress, when they are experiencing, very low times in their life. They're coming to us. And that's what we're there for. So I'm not going to worry about, okay, if I can't get a hold of them at that 6-month reassessment timeline, that's okay. I'm going to see them later. And they know that we're here for them because we're living out being that society of care. So attendance, report writing is something, low rates of insurance. But again, that's our responsibility, our role as a society of care to make sure we're finding ways to address that. And that's part of the solution is those continued partnerships, looking at multiple streams of income and how we can adapt services to be what we know is appropriate, not what managed care tells us is appropriate, not what all these other agencies are telling us that are appropriate, and still working within the boundaries of or the guidelines of our license, but still recognizing culture first always. So that was it for my presentation. Thank you so much for giving me this time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Warrior. And I just want to say what you all are doing is really unique. And it is part of that. When I think about integrated care, it's on a lot of levels. And I think when people think integration, they think, oh, primary care and behavioral health. But you guys are also integrating with traditional services. And that is so incredibly important for people to get better, for Indigenous people to get better. And that's a really unique thing that you all are doing that we don't see a lot within the mental health practice. So I feel like people have a lot to learn from you about it. And I also appreciate you bringing up the challenges that we have with the assessments that are often forced on our communities through these grant programs. They're not just a challenge for you because, we work nationally with a lot of communities, and it's a challenge for all the tribal communities because a lot of these assessments are not culturally competent. And so when you try to implement them, they're not received well and sometimes do more harm than good. And so we got to get serious about that as a serious challenge in implementing some of these Western driven assessments with our tribal youth. And that is what's happening through the NOM. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. We did have some comments in the chat and the Q&A. So I think I asked Dr. Fleming to comment on it, and maybe some of others can comment. Dr. Warrior, you might be able to comment on it. But it is related to those NOMs because it is really a challenge for us. So I thank you for your time. I feel like we could hear from you also all day long today. And I feel like we need to have some more follow-up together with some of these really important discussions. So thank you all for those of you who are hanging in here with us. We have a Jedi group here today. So it's taking us a little bit longer, and some of you are hanging in here with us. So I want to turn now and welcome Dr. Candace Fleming. She is last, but certainly not least. Dr. Fleming is really the one who makes data fun at One Fire Associates, and she currently serves as our Senior Research Director, and she's responsible for providing highly technical assistance and consultation to our team, myself included, and also to the communities we serve. Dr. Fleming has over 40 years of experience in training, administration, research, and evaluation with tribal nations and Indigenous organizations. Much of her career, she served at the National Center for American Indian Alaska Native Mental Health Research, which is at the University of Colorado Health Sciences Center. And through this work, she provided national evaluation technical assistance that you heard about from both Captain Andy Hunt and also that you heard about from Chairman Clyde Estes. She provided that really great, culturally competent technical assistance for both circles of care and systems of care. Welcome, Dr. Fleming.
Well, thank you. Thank you. This has really been a blessing for me to listen to how there's so many dimensions of this movement. It's really not just a fly-by-night kind of practice, but it is changing the way we do things, changing the way we think about services, the people we serve, and how we do things. And one of the things that kept coming up over and over again is the desire to make things better for our families, to raise certain rates up that we want to see more in our communities, lower the rates of things that are destructive and bear much discomfort and illness with our people. And then the big issue is, well, how do we show that there are changes? What is the evidence? And we also know that some evidence of what we do in our communities was developed and communicated generation to generation many hundreds of years ago. And so instead, and in addition to acknowledging the evidence of the past, we are pressed to also consider, how do we show movement toward health, towards healing, and so that wellness can really be told about in our storytelling. And a big part of that evidence search is having multiple ways of defining evidence and hearing from lots of different perspectives what people want to see changed. And there are two major kinds of evidence that typically have been brought forward in the communities that are dealing with a systems of care, a societies of care approach. And one is to know the impact and outcome of the activities that we're doing. So that's what's gone up in terms of more frequency, what behaviors have come down. Maybe even in some instances, what has remained the same, something that is really good and healthy and supportive. And it shows a steady, a statement of steadiness in its evidence in the community or in a family. But there's also a very wonderful set of evidence that comes as we progress along the journey of giving out these services. There's lots of wisdom that's being learned, lessons that are being learned as we carefully observe what's being done, who's doing it, what's being done, how long is it being done, what is changed, what is the cultural piece that makes the difference. And all of this leads to us telling the story about the process. So we keep our eyes on the impact, the changes in the long term, but we also are really important. It's really important to tell a story about how things are done. And because we're keeping an eye on that, how things are done, we can alert each other throughout this system of care about what can be fine-tuned and changed and amended, so we don't have to just stay with a static set of activities and policies and procedures until many months have passed. We can do those amendments along the way and keep track of what we've done to make things different. People have talked about silos, and I am glad that we're getting away from just thinking about silos, and that we're thinking about the system. And it's important for us to visualize a net, because I think a net helps us more in what the society of care is all about. We can notice two things about the net. Is the net has a complexity to it that's different than just seeing silos sitting on a horizon, because there are knots that connect the pieces, the strands of the net. And those represent the services, the staff, the families to be served, the circumstances in which the families are living, policies, procedures that support service provision. But there's also all the connecting strands, which really represent the movement between all of these knots, all of these key pieces of supports and services that are offered to the families. We look at the net, and we also know that it has great visibility. The wooden structures, the metal structures of the silos do not allow us to look inside to see what's going on. But with the net, it is very transparent. We can see we can visualize the activities that are going on especially when they're done from above and looking at the whole net as it's working. And so with this high visibility also comes opportunities to be accountable to one another, and most of all, accountable to the people we serve. One of the important issues that was just raised in that beautiful story about how culture can come first in the packaging of services for people is that we have to work within a system where sometimes there's mandated questions about evidence and what we prove or show is being done. And so we do have to sit down very early, in fact, almost, I would say at the very beginning, to think about what is the evaluation plan to put in place so that we can get not only the mandated evaluation questions planned out, but also what are the evaluation questions that are important to local stakeholders. Get that local people buy-in by hearing what it is they want to see us track over time to be changed. So it can be a balancing act to, yes, when it's necessary, to attend to what outsiders might mandate, or even our decision makers are mandating, and the local people are also bringing forward to have us evaluate and track and monitor. Excuse me. So in the beginning, it can be feeling very overwhelming to think about an evaluation that plans all of these complex aspects. But it need not be overly complicated if we all work together and think about using the resources we have, the physical resources, the human resources, to obtain the information we need and report on it in a way that is really useful and helpful in the decisions that are made along the way. So the reporting that was mentioned is very key to keeping the momentum going, because we're telling the story from all of these different perspectives, and they're all valuable because they knit together to show how strong this net is in supporting our families. I know Dr. Barr just asked me to also think about sustainability, and it's all been it's been broached already by the speakers you've heard before. Is how does one think about keeping up this momentum as time goes on? And I saw in the chat that you don't have to think about sustaining every last element that is a premium systems of care or society of care. Often it's looking at what is the most doable, what is the most acceptable, what is the most reasonable, as being seen by the community as being culturally respectful and responsive, and really supporting that in sharing the success stories. And then there'll be elements that are going to be harder to sustain. And if you have a sustainability plan in the beginning, and thinking about sustainability early on, you'll be able to check into those places where it's harder to think about sustainability and do some problem solving ahead of time. Perhaps you'll think about braided funding in a way that will show how programs collaborate and very carefully account for the funding, but show how they can be supported in a complementary way. You can use evaluation outcomes and process results to support proposals for outside funding. Decision makers can create policies that support the work you're doing that maybe not even don't need money, but support a philosophy of the programs working together in a more effective way. You can share spaces and materials that already exist and therefore sustain elements of your programming. And the positivity that comes from cultural leaders and other wisdom keepers can really enhance the general support of a population. And all of this means that we very carefully report frequently about how things are going and why we think things are going well and how we've attended to the challenges and perhaps change things so that the movement can go forward more smoothly. Sometimes that means saying something isn't working,
Yeah.
and it's too valuable. Our resources are too valuable to keep putting into it. That happens, and we have to have the courage to say, well, what we've been observing really does suggest that we might set that aside and look at it in a different time.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. One of the things that you talked about, I think is so important is that, there's all these national requirements maybe or mandates that we have to do. And yet it's really important to do what we call the local evaluation. And that's what does the community want to know? And that engagement of the community to me is really a big part of thinking about sustainability is, are we moving in a direction and measuring things that the community thinks are valuable and meaningful? And I feel like a lot of times we kind of get stuck on the national evaluation level and forget that, wow, we could be measuring things that are really important for us. And just that process of engaging the community in that, I think is such a critical piece. And I do appreciate you kind of really thinking about helping us think about how evaluation really, it doesn't have to be so difficult, right? Or so complex. And although it can feel overwhelming, evaluation is such a critical part to sustainability because you can start to learn what's working, maybe what's not, maybe what you need to change, and taking that growth model that it's not about what people did wrong, but it's what where we can grow together based on the learning and information that we have at this time. So I really appreciate you putting that context on it. And thank you for joining us today here as well. And thank you all. There's like over 40 people still on. So thank you all for still hanging in there with us. I know our session's going a little bit longer. There have been some Q&As that folks are putting in the chat, and there's been some responses to those Q&As. I did want to go ahead and pull up our contact information here. These are the email addresses for everyone that you heard from today. And so if there's anyone that you wanted to follow up with directly, this is how you could get in contact with them. We also, remember, put the SurveyMonkey link in for the Culture Forward Coalition with Casey Family Programs. That's a great opportunity. If it's you or other communities you want to refer to, this is a great way to start putting these cultural practices to light, and also start connecting with philanthropic organizations and other organizations that might be in a place to help fund some of this really great work that our tribal nations are doing in the advancement of their systems or societies of care. So I want to thank you all very much. I did want to open up, see if there's any other questions or answers or any other comments from the panelists. And in hearing none, I just want to say, Wada. Thank you very much. And thank you, Tracy, for coming in and helping out. I see you there helping out with the host. And I just want to thank everybody for joining in, and thankful that this is recorded so we can access it at a later time, I hope. And I just want to thank you all for being here today with us in this really important topic.
Thank you, Dr. Bartis, and thank you to all the panelists and speakers. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your hope with us today. It is so important, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity to learn from you. I have seen some things in the chat. The slide deck will be available in the resources booth. You can rewatch this as many times as you like, as long as you keep up with that AirMeet link. You can come back and watch it over and over, have access to all the resources. Please, before you leave, click on that blue box at the top of the chat we heard a lot of folks talking about evaluation. That's one of the evaluations. This is a real quick and easy 3-question survey just to let us know how we're doing and what your thoughts are. Thank you all very much for being here. The closing keynote has started, so I invite you all to jump over there to there. Dr. Vargas, do you have anything else you'd like to say before we close?
No, I just want to thank everybody very much for all of your comments, and please feel free to reach out to us if you want to learn more, or if you have additional questions that you want to ask to any of the panelists.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.